When I think back about my life and how I'm different, or how I'm different than other kids who normally stayed in one country. I mean, for you, do you feel like that it's had a major impact on the way you think about things, or how you do things, or look at things?
I would say because it was most noticeable when I went to college in America, that most of my classmates were American. And I assume they were Middle American. I don't really know, because I didn't know what Middle America was. And I noticed that there was a cultural divide, like the music they listened to, especially the music they listened to was not music I had listened to, and the shows they had watched, I had not seen those shows, you know. So it was like a cultural, if you were to consider yourself American, which I was by nationality, it seems like I was in a cultural blackout, you know, for 15 years of my life. And then I go back. So I'm definitely not American, even though by nationality I'm American. And my education is an American education because I went to American schools, but not American. But, you know, as I read more, I begin to realize maybe people who are, you know, 100% American also have this sort of disconnect from their own culture. So it's sort of looking at it from a distance. I can enjoy it, like, for example, I very much enjoyed this book that I was introduced to by a French philosopher called America. The book was called America, and the philosopher was Jean Baudrillard, and he was talking about America, but as viewed by a French person. And I think I can see America, and the more time I spend here, and when I go back, I really do see America like looking through
Other lenses.
A lens.
Yeah.
I don't feel like I'm in the society. I feel like I'm looking at the society.
Yeah, I think one thing about living abroad for so long and then being in the States, you definitely see things differently. I feel that I'm a lot open to a lot of more things than maybe mainstream Americans who haven't traveled. I mean, they may have traveled, but they've not lived abroad. I don't know if I feel like there's more empathy for people having lived in a lot of different cultures. So you have experience with a lot of different cultures. You know, it's not just, oh, I'm so one thing, like nationalistic, like I'm American or something like that.
Yeah.
So you mentioned before that you know, were in the States where you went to college and things like that, and you went to MIT.
Yeah.
Well, and you studied design or architecture at that point?
Yeah, MIT is they're very special. It's an institute of technology, and they're very special in that when you are admitted, you don't declare your major. You're just admitted to the Institute of Technology. And yeah, so that means you've got to take all the core classes with people who want to be physicists or biologists or chemists or whatever. And that was pretty traumatic. As I told you, I'd gone to very small schools. The Philippines was larger, but like Malaysia was again, the class size was back to, 20 people or something. And most of the students in Malaysia were involved, their families were involved in Exxon.
Okay.
So that was a very weird mix of kids who thought they were Texans. If we talk about identity, these people thought they were Texans.
In Malaysia.
In Malaysia. So this is a tropical country where people are wearing cowboy hats and cowboy boots. And they have the can of tobacco.
Can of tobacco. I thought you were going to say the holster.
The skull in their back pocket. And they play football.
Wait, are you talking about the locals, or are you talking about the expats that are...
The expats in the American
in the school. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Which is an interesting story in itself. So
quite extreme.
And then when the yearbook is published, they list your place of birth, and you find out they're all born in like Zaire or Libya. never lived in Texas.
Right.
just
So for
moved-
somehow they
Yeah.
identified.
But they identified very strongly as being Texan. And everybody, I would say like 90% of the school wanted to graduate and go back to Texas. So
Really?
the best school you could possibly go to in that context was Texas A&M because they had a very good, famous football team.
Yes, yes.
I don't know if you know.
Yeah, I do know.
Yeah, so for me to go to MIT was just basically weird. Being an institution and where it was located, it's very developed now, but at the time it was really kind of on the side of an industrial area. An industrial wasteland, so it was quite isolated. But that was also good for me too, because if I'd gone to maybe a state college,
Right.
which was very rah-rah football, like Texas A&M, I might have had a worse time.
Oh,
At least at MIT, the people there already are kind of a fringe group of society. The architecture department at MIT at the time was very socialist oriented, and we were basically taught by hippies.
Oh.
Okay, so I'd like grown up in the third world. I didn't know they were hippies. I didn't know what was going on, and all this social, all these social ideas actually are from the developed world.
Yeah.
Even though they might use the developing world as references, these are all like what we would say privileged or first world concerns.
Yeah, because
now.
the developing world, I mean, they have other things they have to deal with, like getting food on their table and all of this.
Or making mud huts.
Yeah, and
using
stuff,
they would we watched them. They used the dung patties. They
Right.
would use the dung from their water buffaloes to
Yes.
make patties and stick it on the wall.
On the
of mud
walls
hut
for the-
because they
right,
burn
right.
it to cook their meals.
Oh, that must have smelled good.
Yeah, so that would be very fascinating to MIT, which was talking more about, community and man's instinct to create built form and so forth.
Okay, and it's part of architecture, you can say.
Yeah, so I was like really in not only was I in my dorm with this middle-class American cultural, what do you call it? Cultural just shock, culture shock, I guess. Then I also had this academic cultural shock being taught by these socialist professors. And then I had the culture shock of being thrown in with these mathematical scientific geniuses. So there were like all kinds of multiple shocks
going on. Yeah.
going on here. So
And you still
it was a very
survived.
difficult time.
Oh.
Yeah.
So what do you feel then was the most difficult time, or what was the one thing that you felt was the hardest thing to deal with? Because you moved, until you were 18. Oh, you were really young.
18, yeah. Which is
Yo,
really
but you
young,
had lived in the States at one point when you were really, really
very,
young.
very young.
Yeah, and then at 18, you went to the college there. So I guess it was kind of just thrusting you while you're, more of an adult or older that you can understand things, but thrusting you into that American
Right,
culture.
which is what you did then.
Yeah.
Now I hear like the parents, they take the kids to school and they're very involved. That's what I heard. At that time, no, they just put you on a plane and you went,
Yeah. Yeah. So what was the most difficult thing for you? I know there was a lot of cultural shock and things like that, but
all of those things.
all of those
All
things
of those
impacted
things,
you.
yeah. And I want to tell you something else that was kind of funny in MIT. I had a couple of black friends. There weren't very many blacks in MIT, but I had a couple of friends. They would come and talk to me. Like people would come and talk to me. And I think it's because I didn't know there were races or racism.
Because you never experienced it yourself
Yeah,
abroad.
No,
at all.
so
Yeah.
so I was like an empty slate. So I think when I look back on that, I think that's really wonderful. Like you said, you're more open and receptive, and I think I was just kind of very empty slate. I didn't go in. I didn't have any presumptions or assumptions, which I think is why they would come and talk to me and tell me things that maybe they wouldn't tell anybody else.
Right. Did you yourself experience racism then? I mean, you didn't really know what it was, but
You could still feel it.
so you did feel that. I mean, racism for yourself at that time too?
Not racism against me, but you would be aware, especially Boston. You know, Boston is supposed to be an extremely segregated city.
Yeah.
But there were times when you would realize you were at a party and you were the only Asian, or there was another Asian. There were only 2 Asians in the party.
Yeah.
That might have happened to you. And you don't talk to the Asian. You stay on the other side of the room from the Asian.
Oh, is that a conscious thing to you?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, because you're amongst... But, you know, when you were living abroad, when you were going to school and growing up, because Malaysia, you lived in the Philippines, you lived in...
All the students were from everywhere.
Right, so not necessarily Asian, so it's not like you're avoiding them, because at this party you did.
At the party you did.
So that's interesting.
Yeah, in school you didn't. They were just like... this is an interesting question.
Yeah, so you haven't really thought about it.
You don't avoid.
Maybe it's an unconscious type of
but
thing.
you avoid the boys.
Oh yeah, maybe.
Right? Because you don't want
so
people
it's
to
like,
think, oh, you should go out with the Asian,
because you're
Which has
one
happened-
yourself
which
or
has
something.
happened to me.
Right. Okay.
People will say, will just assume 2 Asians should go out together.
Right.
I don't know if that's ever
So
happened to you.
Of course, there's always assumptions that people have, but so it's you deliberately didn't want to be part of that assumption.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I did.
So that's an unconscious thing, maybe.
So actually, it's a kind of, I don't know what it is, a kind of racism or kind of.
It's hard to say because it's like, are we Asian and we're racist towards other Asians? Because that seems like it would be if you did avoided them at a party or something.
Yeah, so I think when I went to graduate school in Harvard, that was the first time I really had Asian friends.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
But...
And did you feel like you were different than them, or you were able to integrate with them because you're Asian, or it still was, you know, kind of...
It's, interestingly, you're immediately comfortable with them. Yeah. I don't know why.
Okay. Maybe because you've gotten a little bit older and you kind of been in the States for a while, so you're not in that cultural shock moment. You've kind of adapted and adjusted a little bit. So you could...
But I also think Asians, like, at that time, right, back then, now people talk about their ethnicity and, you know, you've got social media. What it's like to have a Chinese mom and all that stuff. We didn't have that back then, right? Nobody talked about race. Back then.
Right.
So, and yet, when Asians are together, there's definitely some shared something, you know, what we call mochi. I don't know what it is. You feel more relaxed. And
Yeah, I think it's weird because maybe in certain parts of your life, depending on what stage you're at, in your own self-identity or in your own confidence level or something like that, things shift in terms of, you know, I don't know. Maybe that's what it is. You felt comfortable in your skin. You weren't Asian. There's other Asians there. And it just seemed good to fit in